Welcome to China Focus. I'm Shelley Zhang. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry left his first official visit to China this weekend with a pledge from both countries to work together on North Korea. Both the U.S. and China say they're committed to help find a peaceful way to de-nuclearize the Korean peninsula. But conventional wisdom says that China, as North Korea's closest ally, has the most ability to influence the regime there. But what kind of relationship do North Korea and China really have? And how are the Chinese leadership approaching the North Korea issue? Here today to talk about this, we have Chen Zhifei and Jason Ma. So, how much kind of influence, or say, do you think China really has over North Korea?
Pretty minimum. We can see two examples. Like last November, when North Korea was saying they are going to test a missile, and China sent a pretty high-level official Li Jianguo to there, basically saying, please don't do that. And 2 weeks later, they failed the missile. And then early this year, when North Korea is saying, we are going to test our nuclear bomb, and China kind of said, can we send somebody to go negotiate with you? North Korea said, please not. And then several weeks later, they failed.
Well, on the other hand, I think China's support to North Korea is essential to survival. Without China's support, it's widely estimated that the North Korean cannot continue or have to collapse in a couple of months at the most.
Do you think North Korea sees China as its closest ally?
I don't think they consider China as a kind of a friend. They just think China is somebody they can get money and food and energy from, but they don't really look pretty highly about China. They mainly pay attention to U.S. attitude. I mean, basically, the number one thing they want to do is have a one-to-one talk with U.S. Like this kind of Mr. Kim want to directly call Obama, give him a call. And so basically their attention is about the U.S., not about China.
That's true. That's a point I agree. And also the American government has insisted, stood the ground that they will not grant Kim such a privilege because the previous diplomatic efforts have all failed from Albright days on the Clinton administration up until now. So in the eyes of North Korea, I think they somehow found out the baseline of Chinese regime and their stance on North Korea. They knew China viewed North Korea as a buffer strategic area that they cannot afford to lose in its antagonism, in its struggle against the United States in that area. So whatever they do, whatever mischievous acts they could put on, China will keep sending food on the field this way. I think that's their calculus. And I agree with Jason that the ultimate goal of North Korea is to win the recognition, official recognition from the United States, therefore to securing a birch or kind of a spot in the national community.
So what kind of relationship would you say North Korea and China have? So North Korea depends on China?
It's a mutually exploitative. Each one see the other as a partner that can be take advantage of, that have some utility in its common united front against the West. However, they each have their own calculus, their own strategic aims. So towards the West, they probably sometimes have unified front, but they also have internal struggles.
Right. I guess the relationship is constantly changing. And at the very beginning, we know in the early 50s, that's a Korean War. At that moment, North Korean is the frontier of this communism kind of territory. So at that moment, so China really supported as this Cold War concept. Then China got into trouble with the Soviet Union. So in the early 70s, at that moment, Korea also played between these two superpowers. And so kind of China also tried to make a friend out of them. At the later 80s, early 90s, because there is a Tiananmen massacre and all the world abandoned China, so Korea is the only kind of country they have. So that's our communist kind of friends. The only country kind of befriended with China at that moment. And then in the early 20s, because China really want to get to the global kind of a market like WTO, so North Korean is basically a toy for Chinese government to play with global kind of force like U.S. So basically, at several kind of cases, it's a bargain chip over there. But in the past 7 years with China's kind of position grow in the world and became strong, can be a kind of a power over there, the need for Korean is really kind of diminishing. And that's the reason North Koreans feel like they cannot depend on China anymore. They really want a bigger global recognition, and especially U.S.
Well, I think I just want to add up on to Jason's point. I think there's probably something more to that, because the relationship between the so-called communist regimes countries are never the same as that in the West. Because if you look at a special relationship between U.S. and Britain, UK, they forged a common alliance and they really help out with each other. However, there was a constant internal struggling or fight in a communist regime. And this became especially astute and also crucial for North Korea after the collapse of the Soviet Union, because they lost the umbrella of a protection from Soviet Union. Therefore, they have to resort to nuclear power for their protection, because neither China nor Soviet Union would give them the new Russia and current regime of China would give them such kind of nuclear protection. So they have to buy technology from others. It's why they believe they got the technology from Pakistan, from a Pakistani scientist called Abdul Akadia Han. So that's a long history of it. However, right now, I think China has continued the strategy of supporting North Korean regime, and they are paying a price for it.
Well, let me ask, I mean, are we seeing any kind of change in the Chinese leadership in the last few weeks? North Korea has been increasingly kind of making very strong statements, kind of like drawing the attention of, you know, people in the U.S., things like that, saying, like, are Chinese leaders like changing the way they look at North Korea?
I think we know the current leadership in China got this power at the end of last year, and since they got a power, and they tried a couple of times to try to talk with Mr. Kim. Every time they got this cold face, and Mr. Kim just do whatever he wanted to do. But clearly the reason is Mr. Kim's power inside North Korea. And you know, Xi Jinping clearly said we can't allow some person because of his personal interest to disturb the local kind of stability and global stability. I think clearly Chinese government recognize all this noise made by Mr. Kim is because of he want to consolidate his power in North Korea.
So you say the Chinese leadership considers North Korea, the current regime, kind of unstable?
His power is not unstable, but he want to make the global kind of situation unstable so that he can consolidate his power inside North Korea. Everyone recognizes this, and the Chinese government also recognizes, and in addition, they recognize this is hurting China because of for two reasons. One is definitely kind of an unstable kind of situation is not good for economy. China is focusing more economy. And also another is when they have this kind of all this crazy talk and the US begin to send more and more ship and plane to Asian Pacific area, which is really kind of make the Chinese kind of unease because they just kind of break the local balance, military balance over there. So everything is caused by this troubled small kind of a neighbor, and which they support for the past 56 years.
So is there any chance, do you see that the Chinese leadership will, you know, kind of withdraw support from North Korea? You're saying North Korea depends on them for, you know, a lot of like economic ties, things like that. Is there a chance that the Chinese regime will actually pull back from that?
I don't think that will happen in the near future because although Western media intuition is they are afraid of the refugee, no. I mean, nothing can be worse than what's happening right now in North Korea. I mean, anything is better than what they got now. So if there is refugees should be a lot now. But I think the major thing is there is kind of old thinking in the Chinese regime, inside the regime, and the new thinking. I mean, the old school are still pretty powerful. They still have this kind of ideology mentality. They still have some concern about if the united kind of Korean, what will happen to US. So basically, they still want to play this chip. this kind of, although this became
keep
normal.
North Korea as the buffer state
Right.
idea.
Yeah.
So Jason, I want to go back to something you said, which was the idea that if North Korea collapsed and there was a refugee situation, China wouldn't be that worried about it. That's kind of surprising to hear.
If it really Kim's power disappeared, I think that all the people in North Korea, they want to go to South Korea, not really go to China. Right now they go to China just because between North Korea and South Korea there is a kind of military zone, then we can get over it. They go to China to go to South Korea.
That's true.
Right. Right. So basically, I think there is no kind of this kind of so-called refugee issue. I mean, it's just an excuse. I mean, and a major thing is ideology.
Yeah, that's probably one of the biggest fallacies in the Western thinking when they strategize, try to figure out what's going on in the Korea Peninsula. They thought the Korean leaders, North Korean leaders, would have similar kind of belief as Western leaders, the Chinese leaders as well. But no, this is all fallacy, because if you look at what happened in Tiananmen Square in 1989, the Chinese government can roll out tanks to kill its own students and their elite class intellectuals. They would have no qualms using machine guns to gun down all those people who dare to cross Yalu River at the peak of a crisis. I have no doubt about that. So this whole refugee problem for Chinese government, if there was a Korea crisis, was a whole just bullshit. I mean, I shouldn't have used that word, but that's exactly the Western thinking way of looking at China. And I think the current crop of Western leaders have gone beyond that, because if you look at commentary put out by those so-called experts 10 years ago, it's very widespread. But if you look at evidence of recent statements made by Senator McCain and political heavyweight Chuck Schumer, they asked at a Congress that the United States government, especially the Obama administration, should be wary of the Chinese government, because they thought Chinese government have some ulterior motive. So the the refugee problem was just an excuse made by the communist government in its
So there is
defiance.
sometimes a perception that China has some ulterior motive in regards to North Korea, or China is somewhat behind what North Korea does. Do you think that's legitimate at all?
I think, right, and I think as Jason described, the things have been changing, because 10 years ago, what was in power at China's leadership, especially in the military, were people who fought the Korean War. So the memory still linger on. They knew that American forces were very powerful. They still have that memory. So the last thing wanted is to have American GI stationed at the Yalu River. But things have changed a lot. Now those people are gone, and the Chinese civilian, the population, also reacted differently. Now up to 90% of people, if you look at the bloggers, they didn't like the current relationship with North Korea.
Right, Chinese people want to abandon kind of North Korean. They like South Korean more than North Korean, and it's just because some historical reason. It will be a kind of a very dramatic kind of statement. Of course, North Korean is such an unpredictable country. They may also consider, like, if they kind of begin to tough on North Korean, maybe they can point all the guns to China, and they do have this nuclear power. I mean,
if they really wanted to, if China really wanted to, kind of. Send a strong message to North Korea. They have the capability to do that.
They do have. I mean, there is kind of report talking about after the February nuclear test, China just kind of strengthened their kind of smuggle kind of business between the border. Just this one single act makes the price of rice in North Korea grow 80%. So basically, China has 100 different ways to manipulate it in North Korea.
And actually, economic aid aside, China has found out probably from the recent reactions of Xi Jinping and Li Keqiang that they could just forging a united front alliance with the United States against North Korea. That could send the strongest message yet. Right. That's unprecedented, because traditionally it was China plus North Korea against the United States. If just China shift aside a little bit, not entirely on the other side, but be more friendly, be more cordial with the United States, just as shown in Li Keqiang's reception of Kerry, then North Korea will get very nervous. I can point to one incident or non-incident that would prove this point, because the North Korean has had a schedule to launch a rocket on the 10th, ahead of Kerry's visit. However, because of the rhetoric, because of those exchanges and the strong message sent out by Xi Jinping, they stopped doing that. Up until now, the launch was still not happening.
No, of course, we can't really think that's because they're afraid of China totally. I mean, definitely there are probably some other calculation in their equations. But clearly, I guess, if China is showing stronger kind of or clearer position in this situation, it really can discourage this kind of crazy talk in North Korea.
And that's what they're doing, you're saying right now?
They are not clearly doing it. They just gave a very vague message, although there is the implication from these two sentences, from these two leaders. But I think they should give a clearer message.
Yeah. All right, thank you both for talking to us about this today, and thanks for watching. For more on this and other issues in China, join us at ntd.tv.